Looking at the North Portico today, the White House projects an image of total, impenetrable security. It sits securely behind heavy iron gates and manicured hedges, protected as a permanent symbol of American power. However, this outward image of stability hides a history of physical ruin. The building has been burned to its foundation before, and the life inside is often defined more by emotional chaos than by the strength of its stone walls. The original design for the building came from James Hoban, the son of an impoverished Irish tenant farmer. His influences were distinctly European, like this facade of Leinster House in Dublin, a building Hoban studied before emigrating to America in 1785. Hoban began his career as a simple carpenter on a country estate. He was an unlikely candidate to draft the executive mansion for a fledgling nation, yet he was tasked with translating those rural trades into a grand neoclassical residence. Understanding the White House requires looking past the grand exterior. Its true nature is found in its physical destruction and the private, psychological scars that have accumulated within its walls over 2 centuries. During the War of 1812, British strategy focused on direct retaliation. In response to American troops burning property in Upper Canada, British commanders launched an amphibious attack on Washington, D.C. Following a total collapse of American defenses at the Battle of Bladensburg, 4,500 British troops marched into the capital. They moved through the city streets without facing any resistance from the American military. The occupation was a moment of deep humiliation. When British officers entered the presidential mansion, they found a feast still sitting on the table. The invaders sat down, ate the dinner prepared for President James Madison, and drank the wines from his cellar. Once they finished the meal, the soldiers piled up furniture to use as fuel and set the mansion ablaze. The fire was intense enough to melt the glass skylights and gut the interior, leaving the physical symbol of the United States government in ruins. The burning of 1814 shattered the idea that the Capitol was safe. The nation's most important building had been proven completely defenseless against a determined enemy. As the British approached, the mansion was a scene of frantic activity. First Lady Dolly Madison worked with a 15-year-old enslaved attendant named Paul Jennings to coordinate the rescue of George Washington's portrait and the household silver just minutes before the invaders arrived. The fires were eventually extinguished by a freak meteorological event. A massive thunderstorm, and possibly a tornado, swept through the Capitol, killing several occupying soldiers and forcing a British retreat. In the aftermath, the White House was a blackened, hollowed-out shell. Reconstruction took 12 years, far outlasting the temporary brick structure Congress used as a fallback. This total physical devastation established a new identity for the building. It became a structure defined by its capacity to be rebuilt from the ashes, rather than its original permanence. While the physical walls were eventually restored and fortified, the people living inside became exposed to a different kind of vulnerability. The modern White House functions as a high-pressure psychological fishbowl. Maintaining a normal family life here is a constant struggle against a public stage. Presidents are expected to raise their children while the South Lawn is regularly open to thousands of people for events like the annual Easter egg roll. Over the last century, intense media scrutiny has systematically stripped away the privacy of first families. Reporters and photographers track everything from the children's dating lives to their personal struggles, leaving them with very little room for a private life. The lack of privacy is so suffocating that it necessitated the creation of isolated retreats like Camp David. These locations serve as essential escapes where the president can experience a moment of normalcy away from the cameras. Occupying this building requires the complete surrender of a private life in exchange for symbolic power. The deepest toll the house exacts is the way it amplifies personal grief. There is no private space to process tragedy when you are living in the public eye. Historical records show that several first families suffered the loss of their children within these walls. Abraham Lincoln had to endure the death of his 11-year-old son Willie to illness, while the weight of the Civil War rested on his shoulders. John F. Kennedy faced a similar tragedy with the death of his infant son, Patrick. A president must find a way to process devastating family grief while simultaneously serving as a public anchor for a nation's own collective mourning. These stone walls do not shield the people inside from pain. Instead, they turn a home into a crucible where private human suffering is played out under extreme public pressure. The White House exists as a living paradox. It is a physical target that has been burned to the ground and an emotional fishbowl that tests the resilience of every family that enters it. It remains an irony that this architectural draft, designed by an Irish tenant's son, was nearly erased by an invading army, yet remains the center of global power. This timeline shows the institution survives through its capacity for recovery, not invincibility, but relentless resilience. The building represents the constant, difficult work of maintaining an institution despite its human and physical fragility. It requires continuous restoration and effort just to remain a viable symbol of leadership. The enduring power of the President's House resides in the ordinary people who occupy it. They are the ones who endure these extraordinary pressures, proving that the institution survives through human endurance rather than stone and mortar.